What's up, guys? It's Matt here. I'm here in Northwest Track with the fam. As you can see, my mom here making another appearance from a previous video. We're about to go into the Northwest Track roaming area. Well, we're going to see some live animals here, like
one thing I love the most about Northwest
buffalo and elk and all kinds of stuff. And due to COVID-19, we're doing this with our own vehicles, which is we've never done that before, so it's the first time for everybody. It's pretty cool so far. We're listening to the one of the staff members talking through our call radios, which is I'm shocked about that. I think that's really cool. So bear with me. I'll try to film as much as I can here.
Bald eagle and things that move catch our attention. I really encourage you all, rather than looking for color and shape, to look for various little movements, like the flicking of ears or twitching of tails, or even heads lifting behind rocks or stumps. Now that we're all in the free roaming area, we're putting on those predator eyes, and you know, sometimes I can't see an animal. I'm a lot lower to the ground, or it can come out right after I leave. So there is an exception to the rule. If you guys are seeing an animal, or it's just an animal in a difficult location, you're more than welcome to quickly point out the window in the general direction of where that animal is. That way all the other cars behind you are also able to see it. Now right at the crest of the hill, as we make our way around Horseshoe Lake off to the left-hand side, I did see some black fuzzy antlers sticking up above some of those grasses and foxglove on the other side of Horseshoe Lake. It looks like we do have caribou bedded down on the other side of Horseshoe Lake. They're showing off their amazing camouflage ability, so try to look for those ears.
Yeah.
And they're all bedded down. You'll see that skinny log. Looks like a lot of ducks are kind of perched along that log. If you look just behind that, you'll start seeing their antlers. We actually have two different types of caribou out here. We have our barren ground caribou and our woodland caribou. Physically, it's quite challenging to tell the two apart, but behaviorally they are very different, and they do live in different types of habitats.
There's some more down there.
Both species of caribou do prefer high elevation, colder
on
climates.
this side. Oh, we
do have a lot more caribou coming up here. Keep following the water's edge towards the fence line off to the left-hand side. You'll see a caribou walking right along that little patch of sand.
Oh, okay.
Even though caribou live in colder climates and high elevations, they're actually excellent swimmers. They're very buoyant. So when a caribou does decide to swim, it's quite humorous to watch. About half of their body is actually above the surface of the water, and their tails stand straight up. So it's quite entertaining to watch caribou swim. And I do think right as we make the crest of our hill and we get to our tour station gates to the right, we do potentially have more caribou that are going to be bedded down at the very bottom of our hill to the left. So barren ground caribou, just like their name suggests, they tend to live in habitats barren and ground, like tundras in Canada and up north into Alaska. Their numbers are doing quite well. Woodland caribou, on the other hand, much different. Woodland caribou prefer to live in high elevation, old growth forests. Historically, woodland caribou did live in Washington State in the Selkirk Mountains. That's that northeastern corner of the state. But because they're more of a specialist animal, they're a bit of a pickier eater. During winter, most animals leave those high elevation habitats and move leave those high elevation habitats and move lower. Caribou, at least the woodland caribou, do the exact opposite, and they actually move higher up in elevation, usually 4,000 feet or higher. That's because they rely on a very special food source to survive the harsh winter months. Caribou rely on moss and lichen growing up and down those old growth forests. That's their main food source that they rely on to survive those really harsh winter months.
You can have weddings.
Unfortunately, throughout the
I know.
years,
That would be
we've
amazing.
lost
Wouldn't
a lot
it,
of
though?
those old-growth forest habitats. And our woodland
there's
caribou
another
have
one.
lost that really critical component to their home.
He has some big antlers.
Because
Yeah,
of
he
that
does.
habitat loss, woodland caribou are actually one of the most critically endangered animals we have out here at Northwest Track.
There's some
And
geese.
unfortunately, they did go locally extinct out here in 2019.
Here's some geese, Willow, right
We
on the
just
edge
have
of
a few
the road
isolated
here
birds
to your
way
left.
up north into Alaska, but we no longer have woodland caribou in the lower 48.
Please don't attack us.
We've got lots of Canada geese up here to the left.
Please don't attack.
You might be able to hear our goslings, which aren't really goslings anymore. Look a lot like the adults, just a little bit smaller, and they still have kind of those baby goose calls. Even though we're at kind of the low point of our woodland caribou's conservation story, they're a really great reminder of why it's so important for all of us to do our part in helping to protect our wild spaces. The hope is for the woodland caribou to once again return out here to Washington State, so we can all do our part, helping to ensure the woodland caribou have a home to return to. If we're hiking or camping any time of the year, be sure that we are following that leave no trace policy, helping to leave those environments cleaner than what we found them. That's one easy, simple way to really benefit a lot of our local wildlife currently living there, and hopefully animals that may return to us in the future. Catch a few last-minute views of our caribou.
It's definitely a
beautiful
different
Horseshoe Lake.
perspective.
And as we've been
It
kind
is.
of driving
It's
around
cool.
Horseshoe Lake, you may have noticed, especially next to that caribou along the fence line, that there are actually 2 human homes back there too. Those human homes across the lake, they do hold a very special place in a lot of our hearts out here at Northwest Track, and that's because they belonged to the original park founders.
I can hear all the birds.
Their names were David and Connie Hellier.
Can't hear that.
They came out here in 1937 and they paid a whopping $450 for the first 100 acres of land. If you do the math, that is $4.50 per acre. Amazing. Even during that time frame, that was a pretty cheap price. This area was freshly disturbed from logging events and a wildfire that went through the area in 1924.
Mushrooms.
You can still see evidence of those past events that took place out here almost 100 years ago, so keep an eye out for that. But the Helliers, they fell in love with the land. They built that home across the lake and actually raised 3 daughters out there. Eventually, though, their daughters, they began growing up and they left the house, and the Helliers were faced with a decision on what they wanted to do with this land that they had
I'd
been
never want to
accumulating.
leave. I'd
So
want
that's
to
when they
inherit
decided
it
it
from
was
my
time for them to
parents.
follow their dream of opening
Yeah.
up a wildlife park. They wanted a place where children and adults alike
Are
could
they
come out
dead?
here and view native
I
Northwest
think so,
wildlife
yeah,
in
the
their natural
original,
habitat.
her and him.
And that's exactly what they did. In 1971, they generously donated about 500 acres to Metro Parks Tacoma in 1971. And a short 4 years later, in 1975, their dream became a reality when Northwest Track opened its doors for the very first time. It's actually 45 years to the day. So, maybe you want to dream big and you have big plans to open up your own wildlife park one day. Go for it. Dream big. Or maybe you're like me and you want to start someplace just a little bit smaller. You can also help out by providing man-made animal homes for different types of birds, bats, bees, and butterflies. It's a great way to attract wildlife into your own backyards. A lot of really great plans you can find online at the moment too.
Where's all
They're
the
free to
bees
download
at?
and usually pretty easy to build. As we leave our wetland behind and we're making our way through our meadow, I am going to pick up the pace just a little bit, so do please keep up the pace with me. Once we start seeing animals, I'm going to go nice and slow once again.
Yeah, usually you see something in here.
Mm-hmm.
The bison.
Even though we're not seeing too much out here right now, doesn't mean that the animals aren't out here using this space or that this space isn't important. Nature, it has a way to tell us stories of past events and what animals have been moving through the area, sometimes we just need to take a closer look and reread some of the stories that nature's trying to tell us.
Monarch butterflies.
Look for game trails out here, particularly in the meadows. Sometimes if you follow the game trails the animals create, sometimes you'll find one laying down not too far away from it.
Back into
You
the
can also look
forest
for
we go.
animal scat, which is a fancy word for animal poo.
Yeah, you can see it on the ground.
It's actually a great way to tell what animals are moving through the area and what they're eating.
I think that's the geese.
Can you see,
look
Willie?
for
Yeah, I see a
bison
deer.
wallows, particularly out here
Do
in
ya?
the meadows. They create those saucer-like depressions in the ground, and they take basically a big old dust bath, helping to keep some of those insects away, and also help
Oh,
fresh
here.
natural sun.
Oh, here we go. Oh,
Oh
mama.
my gosh! Speaking of bison, we've got a big
Oh, here we
bison
go.
coming
That's
up.
scary.
Over
Don't
here to
stop.
the right. Right as you go
Oh,
into
I
the
forgot
forest,
you're-
you'll see this big guy.
He's like
He's also
right
created
there.
a wallow right along the edge of the forest. Take a look at his fur as we drive by, see if you can spot any seeds he might be carrying along with him or plant
We
material.
got some bison over here.
But take a
One
deep breath in
one
with
bison.
your nose, see if you can smell that bison aroma.
Hey, Bison. You're cute.
I can get a few whiffs of it as we drive by. So once again, the bison are entering into their rut, so these bulls can be a little bit more ornery than they would be any other time of the year. So these guys are all doing an excellent job with keeping those tires rolling and not trying to reach out and touch him.
Why the fuck would you want it?
But the bulls,
People
during
get
the rut,
gored
they
all
do
the
something
time.
extra special in those wallows. They'll actually urinate in them and then proceed to roll around.
It's okay,
covering
Mom.
their bodies with
It's
that
okay,
lovely
Mom.
cologne that
You know,
they
be
use to attract
be
cows.
be yourself, and
Quite the pungent odor.
this is reality TV, people.
Sorry, I don't know if you want cussing in your videos, but it slipped out. Sorry.
Bison
Sorry,
are
y'all.
the largest land mammal by
Yeah.
weight that we have out here in North America. So the adult bull bison, like we just passed, can weigh anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 pounds.
It was a little smaller than the ones I saw in Utah.
Well, it may not look like they
Alright.
do much out in the environment.
They were huge.
They actually
They were
have a very
scary,
key
too.
role to play out here. Such a key role that they're what we call a keystone species. It's kind of a big fancy word for an animal that's positively benefiting the environment in which it lives, making it easier for other plants and other animals to thrive and survive. They do that through a variety of ways. One, they're so big that as they walk through the grassland habitats, they literally till the soil with their hooves. Those wallows during winter or the rainy season, those wallows fill up with rainwater or snowmelt, providing temporary seasonal wetlands. That automatically provides water for a lot of the animals sharing that same space. But it's also a great temporary home for our amphibians to lay their eggs in. One of my personal favorite ways the bison help benefit the environment. Okay guys, I think we may have a moose off to the right. So we'll talk about the bison in a minute. And she's gonna be really hard to see. I just saw an ear flick. You'll pass through this grove of cedar trees to the right. Look all the way
Do you
towards
see
the
her?
left. You'll see that green vegetation. She's basically laying dead center of all these cedar trees furthest towards the
You're
back.
stopping.
She's completely
Oh my
bedded
gosh,
down,
I'm
head and
going.
all.
Oh, there
Just
she
got a
is.
quick glimpse of
It's just
her
an ear flicker,
giant
like,
ears.
way back there.
So
You wouldn't be able to really see.
hopefully she'll kind of lift up her head for you as we drive by.
All I could see was a black blob with ears and everything.
As we drive near the animals.
I know, well, I'm also going for you to go too, baby.
Silly moose are kind of the experts at playing hide and seek. The bison may be the largest land mammal by weight in North America, but the moose are the tallest. So generally speaking, you'd think they'd be easy to spot. But as we can see now, that is certainly not the case. If you like to play hide and seek, you get along great with the moose. They're kind of the experts at that game. They do tend to be more of a solitary animal, so they spend the majority of their days alone in the forest or the wetlands. And they have that really dark brown coat color, so when they're laying down, or even if they're standing still, they basically look like a shadow out here in the landscape. And that's what they want. They want to play that dangerous game of hide and seek so they can avoid their natural predator, the wolf. We only have 4 moose out here in the free roaming area in 435 acres. They could be the most challenging to spot out here. We do have a few other moose
One's
hotspot
name is
areas.
Willow,
Keep
isn't
an eye
it?
out for the other 3.
I think so.
Remember that baby? they have.
particularly our wetlands on the other side of this hill to the right-hand side. So we'll keep an eye out for them as we continue forward here.
Do you think they know that they're continuing?
As we make our way through the forest back out into the meadow, definitely keep an eye up that hillside to the right. It's going to be a little challenging for us drivers to look all the way up that hill. Sometimes our bighorn sheep ewes are seen up there, and they've been quite skittish. It's baby season, so they've been quite protective of their two little lambs they gave birth to this spring. And along with that, they're also not quite used to our caravan of cars. So keep your eyes up the hill to the right for any sort of movement.
That's a dragonfly.
Right as we start making our way down a little hill, back out into the meadow, I can see we've got a black-tailed deer buck straight ahead here.
You could see it, Will. Oh, look at him.
Looks like this buck is mainly off to the right-hand side, but I spoke too soon. Looks like he's going to move over to the left. He's got a nice set of antlers growing.
Thank you.
Oh, isn't he pretty?
See, they're not used to being fed, so they don't come right up. Like at the Olympic Games.
We've seen two
Well, yeah.
really large animals. Now we're seeing one of the smallest.
Yeah.
The deer are the smallest animals we have out here.
All right.
They're very slow
Beat that.
growing, and
National
maximum weight
Geographic.
about 200, 250 pounds.
I see deer all the time. Oh, there's an
Generally,
antler
usually
shed.
around the 200 mark.
Oh.
So we all get a great look at that black-tailed deer. We'll kind of pick up our pace just a little bit. You may have noticed, though, we've got these really acrobatic birds flying around the meadows. The majority of the birds we have out here right now are barn swallows. They have more of that rust orange colored belly, dark brown backs, or I'm sorry, dark blue backs. But you may also spot a few tree swallows out here. Big difference is tree swallows are going to have a white chest.
Did you know that swallows' nests are like
Mainly
a
out here eating all of
delicacy?
our lovely insects.
For
Very
what?
acrobatic.
Yeah,
They
to
actually
eat
will
in,
bathe
like,
and
China.
drink while on wing. So if you see them swoop
Yeah,
around,
they
What's in
they
it?
like
near the
scrape
surface of
the
the water,
nests
they
off.
could be catching insects,
and
but
clean
they
them.
could be taking a bath.
It's like
or fishing in
spit.
the water.
And
Okay.
people make like
We
soup
have a
out
really
of it.
impressive dust swallow off to the left-hand side, though, if you've been wanting to see
Yeah, I was
one.
watching a documentary about that the other day.
That one's
It was
quite
like,
old, been here a few years, and they'll just
Let's
kind
have
of
some
reuse those wallows
bird
over the
spit
years.
soup.
Take
Sounds
a
good
close
to
look
me.
at that wallow. You may even be able to spot big patches of fur left over as the bison were rolling around trying to dislodge that winter coat. And before we got a little glimpse of the moose, hopefully you guys were able to see at least an ear, and the black-tailed deer, we were talking about how the bison benefit the environment. When we first saw that bull bison, I had you guys look in his fur to see if you could spot any plant material or seeds. It's really neat. Bison are a migrating animal, so they'll walk and travel vast distances throughout our landscapes. Naturally, though, eventually they're going to rub their bodies up against different trees and grasses and shrubs, and they start collecting all of these different types of seeds in their thick coats, particularly along their shoulders or their foreheads. Then they'll travel along even more on their journey, and then they need to rest. So maybe they're going to roll around in a wallow, or maybe they are shedding their winter coat off because it's spring. In the process, they're literally reshaping and replanting the landscape of the plains. Dropping, moving, and dispersing all those different types of seeds into different areas of the land that those seeds couldn't normally move to on their own. That's not only going to be benefiting the other bison, that's going to be benefiting birds, other plants, deer, elk, even predators like grizzly bears and wolves. Pretty
Yeah, you
amazing
can
to think
see,
how
like, all
one
the
animal can
game
directly
trails.
influence
Yeah.
so many others that are sharing that same
Definitely.
grassland habitat. So as we encounter our bison herd, hopefully we will, definitely keep an ear out, or not an ear out, I'm sorry, an eye out, and see if you can spot any plant material they may be carrying around with them. Sometimes I've seen them carrying around giant pine cones out here, which is pretty fun to see. Oh my goodness, we've got a bull elk left-hand side. Right as you make your way into this wetland, it's going to open up. You see the edge of the tree line.
Oh, yes.
Almost like a
Look at the
circular
antlers on
tree
that
line.
guy.
Yeah.
Oh my
You
god. Two bull
Holy
elk.
blends
cow.
really well.
They're bedded down.
Just looks like
Three,
some
nope,
sticks.
two.
Yeah, it
Bull
does.
elk.
Yeah,
They're
look
bedded
at
down
that.
right in front of
Yeah,
that
there's
tree
two of
line.
them.
Is there
You
two?
can
Yeah,
just
there
see their
is.
big antlers sticking up above.
Sir,
all
I
of that
recommend
lovely
to
grass.
shed those. I don't think those are good.
Wow.
They're looking at us like,
What
keep
are you
going,
doing?
keep moving.
One of those trees along the tree line are cedar trees, so that tree line you'll notice directly underneath those trees it's really bare. There's not too many plants growing. Look directly in front of that. Members
What?
of the deer family
Directly in
are
front of
great
that
at hiding,
what?
and they're definitely showing that off today.
I have no idea.
Directly in front of that what? Continue.
Oh my gosh, you guys, we've got a moose really close to us, right off to the left.
Oh.
You see past?
Oh, right here.
We've got
Right
this
here.
other island of trees very close to us to the left. She's literally right
Get your hand back
down this hill to the left-hand side. Really great view of her.
Looks like a damn camel.
It's like a damn camel.
I just don't want to spook her away with my voice as I drove by. Looks like all of us would hopefully get a really great view of her, get a better appreciation of just how tall and just how large those moose are. Moose, they have those incredibly long legs. Bit of a lanky animal, and that has many different
That's what I was
benefits for
noticing
them.
too.
That allows them to easily walk and wade through this wetland water and this wetland mud, helps prevent them from getting stuck in the mud.
Holy
But
cow.
moose, they also prefer
5, 6, 7, 8.
not quite as cold as climates as our animals like the caribou, but 32 degrees Fahrenheit is perfect weather for the moose. So they need those long legs to be able to walk through all of that deep snow cover. Not only that, moose, they're basically the athletes of the wild. They're amazing swimmers, great runners. They can stretch up to 12 feet into the air, trying to reach these overhanging limbs and branches to browse on. And moose, they have these specially adapted nostrils that they'll clasp completely closed, and they will dive up to 18 feet underwater, trying to reach all of that nutrient-rich aquatic vegetation. Such a cool, neat animal. They're one of my favorites. While moose, they're definitely native to the Pacific Northwest, historically, we didn't really see them living out here in the state of Washington. The first time a moose was reportedly seen out here in the state was in 1950. And since then, moose have slowly been moving into Washington from Idaho and British Columbia. What's interesting about moose is they're one of the few animals that do thrive in areas that have been freshly disturbed from natural events like wildfire or human activity like logging. But Eastern Washington has provided them with a perfect home because unfortunately they have had a lot of wildfires in the past, and there have been quite a few logging events that have taken place out there. And as the forest regrows, moose love browsing on all of that new plant regrowth. Today we do have about 4,000 to 6,000 moose living in Eastern Washington. We don't have any established moose living in Western Washington yet. And I always recommend, if you really want to go look for wild moose, I always recommend going to Turnbull National Wildlife Refuge, located just south of Cheney, Washington. Beautiful wetland area, and a lot of people that go there do report seeing moose. Now, if you want to do something a little bit more and you want to put on your citizen scientist hat, if you're headed towards Eastern Washington in the fall, between the months of September through the end of November, and you're headed towards Ferry, Stevens, Okanagan, or Pend Oreille counties in particular, you can help out our local researchers. Since moose are still relatively new out here into the state of Washington, our researchers are still trying to understand moose behavior out here, where they're moving to, where they're not moving to, and what their future is going to hold out here. But they can't be everywhere at once. They certainly need our help. So if you're headed to those 4 counties during fall, go to the Department of Fish and Wildlife's webpage, go into the search engine and type in report a moose. A survey will pop up for you to complete, and they basically just want to know where you were at, how long you were in the field, and whether or not you saw a moose. And as we continue forward, friends, especially as we make our way down those challenging curves, make sure everything's staying inside. That does include our sunroofs. Now, even if you do not see a moose, that's still valuable information. It lets our researchers know where the moose are not moving to. All of that data that they'll be collecting from me and you during those time frames will be used to help create a moose management and conservation plan out here in the state. It's a really fun way to put on your citizen scientist hat on and directly benefit one of our new local animals. I'm going to take it a little bit slower through here. Sometimes we'll get a different angle of our Roosevelt elk. Maybe a little bit challenging to see them from this angle off to the left, but definitely keep your eyes out. I only saw 2 out there, and our Roosevelt elk, all of the bulls do generally form a bachelor herd, so it's only the boys. They do that to just naturally separate from the females, so they don't have this need to compete for the female's attention until it's their breeding season, which is right around early September. Once we pass that cottonwood tree that toppled over and it's leaving those really large root structures exposed, we'll have a pool of water off to the right. Keep an eye out for turtles or frogs. Sometimes we'll see some ducks out here as well. The wetland that we were just in is what we call a seasonal wetland. So the water level is based upon how much rain or snow we get during fall, winter, and spring. It's a great watering source for all kinds of wildlife. And I highly doubt, as we drive by this pool of water off to the right, that many of you would want to drink straight out of it. I don't blame you, probably not the best idea. Even though we can't drink straight out of these wetlands, it's important to remember we still need wetlands to survive in the same way the animals do. These wetlands are like the Earth's liver. They help filter out toxins, pollutants, and animal waste. They prevent all of that from going into our groundwater.
Oh, there's
and into our aquifers where we get our clean drinking water.
Here's the bison herd. There's the bison
70%
herd.
of the earth is covered in water. Majority of that is water we're unable to drink. So if we only calculate how much clean fresh water there is for humans to drink,
closer to the trees. What is that close to the trees?
Oh, a bighorn sheep.
Yeah, there you
I feel
go.
like if they gave you all 70 jelly beans, out of those 70 jelly beans, you could only eat 1.
It's freaking airy.
We can all do our part in helping to protect our wetland habitats. Just be a little bit more cautious about how much water you're using, especially in the hot summer months. Really encourage you all to water your plants early in the morning and later in the evening compared to the middle of the day where it's quite a bit warmer. Less evaporation will occur, benefiting your plants and also benefiting you with your water bill. We're going to take it nice and slow. I'm sure many of you have already seen we've got our lovely bison herd coming up here to our left, along with our bighorn sheep rams.
You got a
See
white butt.
one ram
Yeah.
walking in the meadow just past this big bull bison.
There's a baby.
Oh, there
To the left of
is.
that, in this
Oh,
other
there is a
island of trees,
baby.
You'll see it looks like about 3 more.
Do you see the baby, Will?
It's the child.
You also get a chance to see our little bison calf that was born
child.
almost 3 months ago. Still has that rust orange colored fur.
It's a big 3-month-old.
They're born with that colored fur for an added camouflage. These are out in the wild, and once they turn anywhere from 4 to 6 months old, they start developing that nice chocolatey brown coat color that the adults have. Both bison and bighorn sheep are considered a grazing animal. However, they live in very different habitats. Bighorn sheep prefer those alpine meadows up against steep cliffs, higher up in elevation, where bison are probably not as great as a climbing animal as the bighorn
That
sheep.
one's big.
Yes,
Oh,
that
and that
must
bull
be
bison, he is gonna wallow for you, kicking up all of that dust, taking a nice dust bath.
Leave me alone.
our second bull is in another wallow.
Oh, do only the boys do that? There's a lot of females.
But these
to
bison are
male.
probably not the best climbers, so they do prefer those lower grassland
That's
habitats.
his harem.
Oh look, there's another caribou over there. See the antlers sticking out?
It's amazing to think that at one point we had anywhere from
See the
10 to
antlers, Will?
60 million bison roaming around North America.
Oh yeah.
You can only see them because of the
That would
antlers.
be like if we drove out here and we drove through a herd of 15 to 20,000 bison in a single herd.
Phew.
I couldn't even imagine what that would be like. That would be pretty spectacular. You'd be able to see, hear, and hear, and smell them coming from a ways away.
Yes.
The bison, they certainly have a rich history out here in North America. They had a bit of a rough start. Bison were very much overhunted for their meat, especially when our railroads were being built. All those railroad workers needed food, and so bison was a great food source. They were pretty heavily overhunted during that time frame. One event that really hurt the bison was right after the Civil War. The United States government, they were looking for ways to subdue the local indigenous peoples. So they came up with this idea to eliminate the bison because the indigenous peoples were relying on the bison to survive. That was their source of livelihood. So the government hoped that if they eliminated the bison, it would be easier to push the indigenous peoples off onto reservations. And unfortunately, that endeavor was incredibly successful, and we lost a lot of bison. Didn't take long for our once numerous bison population to drop from 30 to 60 million individuals to less than 400 isolated
That's
individuals
sad.
left. So they were on the brink of extinction. That's why to me the bison really symbolize hope of what can happen when communities come together and practice conservation, working hard to protect our wildlife
why
and
did
their
they
homes.
want to get rid of
Because we
them?
can't protect an animal unless they have a home to live
To
in.
push the Indians into reservations.
Private citizens,
That's what it is.
zoos, many different organizations got involved, and what really helped save the bison from extinction was captive breeding programs that were started. That automatically increased the number of bison being born and out into our landscapes. That really helped them. And then later on in history, Yellowstone was created and opened up in 1872. And Yellowstone was initially created for us, a place for people to go and enjoy the beauty of nature. But Yellowstone also provided the bison with protection because they were unable to be hunted within those park boundary lines. And so over time, we have slowly regrown our bison populations. Today, we do have about 500,000 bison back out into our landscapes. Some are in domestic herds and some are in conservation herds. While they may not be at their historical size, we probably won't ever get that back again.
Yeah.
But we are taking those careful, positive steps to make sure that we have a healthy, stable population of bison today. One of the best places to go to actually look for wild bison would be Yellowstone National Park. There's anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 wild bison roaming free there today, and that's the only place that you can see true ancestral bison. Because bison have such a rich history out here in North America, and because they have such a successful conservation story, in 2016 they were named America's newest national mammal. They kind of joined ranks with the bald eagle. We're gonna leave our open meadow, make our way back out into a forest. This is a great place
hear
to look
something.
for our cow elk. Just like those bighorn sheep use, our elk, they actually had 8 elk calves born this spring.
Wow.
So those elk cows, they're a little bit more protective of their young this time of the year in general, but it also took them a little while to get used to our caravan of cars too. They were becoming a bit more brave compared to the bighorn sheep ewes. but one of their favorite places to be is right as we make this left-hand turn. Keep your eyes along the right-hand side. There's a little, we call it Moose Swamp. It's a little swampy marshland forest further towards the back right-hand corner. And sometimes they all just lay down there and they can see us and we can just barely see them. The type of elk that live out here in the free roaming area are the Roosevelt elk. We're very lucky to have them out here in the Pacific Northwest. They're actually the largest species of elk in the entire world. They're considered an old world deer. And to me, the elk are a very iconic animal of the Pacific Northwest, and I think they just really symbolize that wildness we have out here.
I'm leaving the hair.
The other side of the state, in eastern Washington, you're more likely to encounter the Rocky Mountain elk. Because Roosevelt elk are considered an old world deer, they actually have a very unique trait about them. They have ivory canine teeth. Because elk, or Roosevelt elk, have those ivory canine teeth, they were pretty heavily poached or illegally killed just for those ivory canine teeth.
Sad.
Not only that, the elk were so numerous and so common,
You have to kill
we
them.
didn't realize that we should probably start regulating the animals that we were responsibly hunting.
Well, just like
We didn't realize at the time that we could overhunt the animals. So between those two events,
Yeah,
it
just
didn't
for
take
the
long for us to
tusks.
start seeing our elk populations dwindle down.
Sad.
So much so, in 1905, it actually became completely illegal to hunt elk out here in the state of Washington. And a pretty special
Some of the
individual
kids
got
go to
involved. It's where the Roosevelt elk received their name from. Anyone have any idea who that individual might be?
Theodore
President
Roosevelt.
That would be Theodore Roosevelt, our former president. Theodore Roosevelt was an avid hunter himself.
Grow the
He
trees.
knew how important it was to have the animals out here, though. So what he did was he actually helped create what we know today as Olympic National Park.
Burns.
He dedicated that space so the elk would have food, water, shelter, and space in a protected area. And between having that protected space and the ban on hunting, the elk populations regrew very quickly, where today we have about 60,000 elk living just in the state of Washington, and they're once again considered common. So common that it's pretty common to see Roosevelt elk in our parking lots here at Trek, or in some of those open meadows as you drive home. So even as you guys are leaving the park, keep an eye out for some of our wild elk that make their way through this region. The second road, or the second curve, is a little bit tricky to stay in the center of the road. It almost looks like that road completely disappears because it does dip down. It does help to look at the vehicle in front of you, just to help you stay centered in the road, and I promise you, it's still there. So while it may be a little bit challenging for us to go out and create, national parks or reserve wild spaces just for our favorite animal, we can still get involved by being environmental stewards of our own backyard. There's a really neat program through the Department of Fish and Wildlife that you can get involved in, and you can certify your backyard to be a wildlife sanctuary. All you have to do is provide proof to them that you're providing food, water, shelter, and space. You have a place for an animal to raise young, like a nesting box for a bird. And you have at least one native plant in your yard, either planted in your yard or in a pot. Once you supply that proof, they will send you a really nifty plaque that you can hang in your front yard or your backyard. Show that off to your neighbors and encourage them to do the same. And once again, that's through the Department of Fish and Wildlife. As we circle around Pothole Lake, the second body of water, great view of our two resident trumpeter swans.
Oh, yeah, there they are.
All
right
this
there.
green stuff closest to us, right along the surface of the water. From a distance,
see
it
them,
looks a
Luke?
little bit weird, like moss or algae. It's actually a very nutrient-rich plant called duckweed. And right now, the swans are enjoying a nice duckweed lunch.
Thank you.
These two swans, the reason why they're residents out here is they both unfortunately injured themselves out in the wild, and so they're no longer able to fly. And that's why they call the free roaming area their home. trumpeter swans are extremely large birds. They are the largest waterfowl in North America, so they can stand about 3 feet high, and they have a 7-foot wide wingspan. They're incredibly large. Trumpeter swans, along with other migrating waterfowl, rely on wetlands to survive. They do 2 different things for them. One, trumpeter swans are a migrating bird. So eventually, they're going to need a place to rest. So wetlands are almost like their rest stop along their great migration. Just like if we go on a road trip, we eventually need to stop and refuel our car or maybe get snacks for our bodies. That's what these wetlands provide for trumpeter swans and other migrating waterfowl. Not only that, but wetlands is the only place where trumpeter swans will build a nest. If wetlands begin disappearing, those trumpeter swans will no longer build nests, and we see fewer and fewer swans being born every year.
Yeah.
Now, about 150 years ago, humans, we didn't see how important these wetlands were, and so unfortunately, we lost over half the world's wetlands because we filled them in or we used them as dumping sites. So our trumpeter swans had a bit of a rough start. They didn't have a place to build a nest, so we were seeing large trumpeter swan populations declining because of that. Thankfully though, we've learned from our mistake. We've realized how important these wetlands are, not just for wildlife, but also for us too. So a lot of really great wetland restorative work has already begun. There's definitely a learning curve going on historically, recognizing humans' needs, but also recognizing the needs of the animals and finding that nice delicate balance in between. Another great way that you can help protect not only our wetlands, but all the animals that rely on them, including us, is to consider reducing your reliance on single-use plastics. I know plastics are everywhere, it can be a little overwhelming. So just pick one thing, like skipping the straw or reusing a reusable water bottle, or maybe moving away from those soap scrubs that have those little plastic beads in them. We know now that plastic, it doesn't ever break down, but what it does is it breaks up into little tiny pieces called microplastics. My gosh guys, we are going to see our Mountain Goat kids right as we exit the park. So I'm going to go really slow through this gravel road to the right. You keep your eyes off to the left hand side and you'll see our mountain goats headed down the right. Wondering where they were.
Yeah, I was gonna say we didn't see any of those.
They're so
But as those plastics break down into microplastics, they're commonly mistaken for food by animals at the very bottom of the food chain, like fish, for example.
You remind me of
Even
Gizmo.
Gizmo
And then that plastic will accumulate in their bodies where it will stay there their whole entire lives. And so as they get eaten by another animal, it's going to be moving up the food web until that plastic goes all the way up at the very top of the food chain. And who's at the very top? We are. So we're starting to notice humans being affected by plastic as well. So we can all do our part, not only to make sure our wetlands and our migrating waterfowl remain healthy, but that we do too. I'm really glad we got to see those mountain goats right as we were exiting the free roaming area. That was a fun treat. So I do believe we actually saw every animal that calls the free roaming area its home. We saw the deer, the elk, the moose, we saw the bison, the bighorn sheep, and the mountain goats. And of course our 2 lovely resident swans. Those are always a fun treat to see too.
Yeah, I totally remember those old ones.
Yeah.
Now just by you all coming
They're
out here to Northwest
80s.
Trek, you're already taking that first step of practicing conservation. So I really encourage you to take it a step further and think of one change that you'd like to make this year that would benefit our wildlife, their homes, and us. Just make sure any change that you make is simple and realistic to the lifestyle that you live. Threw out a few ideas earlier, leaving no trace, taking part of those moose surveys, reducing our reliance on plastics, being a little more cautious on how much water we're using, making those man-made animal homes, or certifying your backyard as a national as a wildlife sanctuary. So many different different ways to get involved. If none of those interest you, then do some research. Pick something that you really like. And don't overwhelm yourself with it. I know it can be a little overwhelming, and sometimes that one small thing doesn't seem like enough. So I always like to end the tour with a quote from Jane Goodall. And she said she likes to envision the world like a giant jigsaw puzzle. You look at all the pieces to the puzzle, it's really overwhelming and confusing. But if you only focus on your portion of the puzzle, and you know that people from all over the world are focusing on theirs, that should help encourage that hope. Basically what she's saying is we're all one big community. We all call planet Earth our home, and together we can all make a difference. That concludes our adventure out here into the free roaming area. I hope you all had a wild time along your wild drive. Once again, my name is Jessie. Now, in just a minute, I will be turning off along the side of the road, so don't follow me at that point. I'll be pulling off to the right of our Wild Drive exit sign. Keep following that Wild Drive exit sign arrow to the left. Once you hit the stop sign, if you're ready to exit the park, take your immediate right. If you need to use the restroom or you're doing a wild walk, be sure to bring your face coverings and take your immediate left. Thank you so much for coming out here. I hope you all enjoyed the rest of your day, and I'd encourage you all to turn your broadcast down so I don't blow you away with the static. But we hope to see you again soon. Thanks for coming out.
Alright, so that was the Northwest Truck experience.
As soon as she took off,
and it was a good experience. Definitely go and check that out. And yeah, thank you for watching.